Welcome to Blooming Wildwood Homestead. Today I want to talk about 5 different methods of preserving food. Some that you might be very familiar with, others that you might have considered, but you're just not sure if it's a good choice for you. And so I want to go over 5 different methods for preserving food. The first method for preserving food is canning, and that might be the one that you're most familiar with. When I am canning something, I'm putting it into a jar and going through the process of either hot water bath or using the pressure canner in order to make it shelf stable. Some benefits of canning items: it does preserve a lot of the nutritional value of your produce from the garden. You're able to make it last longer, hopefully to get you through your winter time until you're back to summer and have some fresh food again. And it also is less expensive than having to go out and buy the food at the store. If you are canning your food, it is on the shelf, like I said, so you don't have to worry if you end up with a power outage or if you end up with some type of break in the energy supply. It's always going to be there and it won't be an issue for you. So canning is one of the methods that I like to use when it comes to preserving food. The second method I like to use for preserving food is to freeze items. I have some berries. I've gone through the process of harvesting berries. You can both can and turn them into jam, or you can sometimes can berries whole, or you could go ahead and throw those in the freezer. One of the benefits of preserving food by using the freezing method is that a lot of times it's much faster. So after I finished picking berries, it's really easy to just throw those into a bag, pop them in the freezer, and they're good to go. The food is very fresh. When I go and take it out, I have all of my nutritional value still there because I haven't heated any of the food up, I haven't processed it in any way, and so it does retain its nutritional value really, really well. One of the cons to preserving food with the freezing method is that if you live in an area where you end up with power outages, particularly for an extended amount of time, you do run the risk of potentially losing that product that you've gone ahead and preserved. So if you're going to choose to do a lot of freezing and you live in one of those areas that is really prone to power outages, it might be beneficial for you to make sure that you have a generator in order to keep those freezers running, just to make sure that you don't lose any of your product. Freezing food can also be very cost effective, as the only cost involved oftentimes is your actual freezer bag. But even if you're somebody who buys frozen food from the grocery store, you might even consider purchasing from a local berry farm or looking at a local farm to see if you can get produce to freeze, just because even if you have to purchase it, it might still be cheaper than purchasing the pre-frozen food from the store. So just look at your area, look at the cost of things, and you can decide if that's going to be cost effective for you. The third method of preservation is something that we've been doing a little bit of experimenting with this year, and that is to ferment food. Now, when you're fermenting food, there can be a lot of different benefits to doing the fermentation process. I would say so far the things that we've tried, when it comes to fermenting, there might be a little bit of work up front to get it prepared and get it set to go through the process, but there's probably less work overall than canning. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. These are some fermented pickles. They were whole cucumbers, pickling cucumbers that were fermented, and they've ended up super nice and crunchy. We also have done some sauerkraut this year. You can tell that's been a fan favorite. And the sauerkraut, again, we took a whole head of cabbage and went through that process and were able to go ahead and preserve the food in that way. It didn't take long to get those items started, but then the process is a little bit longer before you can go ahead and use the items. So depending on what you're making, they might have to set and ferment for 2 to 6 weeks. On average, again, depending on what it is that you're doing. Some benefits that you can get from fermenting products. One of the benefits can be that it has a crunchier texture. It retains more of that original texture when you're eating fermented foods. It also contains good bacteria, which is good for your gut. Has some probiotic tendencies, and so that can be really good for your digestive system and helping you through in that way. It also has a pretty long life after it's fermented, of being able to last in the refrigerator. So a lot of times you can keep it in there for maybe 6 to 12 months, depending on the item. If the food actually lasts that long because it tastes so good, that you probably will eat it before that time is up. Some of the potential problems with fermenting might be, again, that electricity issue. If you have to store it in the refrigerator or in a cooler, it's going to require constant electricity and refrigeration in order to keep it at that temperature. And so if you run into power outages or with power problems, that might be a situation for you that you want to be aware of. The other thing is some people just kind of have an aversion to fermented foods. So know yourself and know if that might be something that you want to do more research on and that you might want to check out. The next form of food preservation is dehydration. I have an example of a food dehydrator here, and what has worked really well is that you can put pretty much any kind of food in your food dehydrator and you're able to preserve it in that way. Some of the benefits to dehydrating food is that it takes up less storage room because you're shrinking down the volume of the product, and so it doesn't take as much space when you're trying to store it. It is not requiring refrigeration because you've already taken all of the moisture out of the food, and so you don't have to keep it in the refrigerator, and that can be a real benefit. The other thing is it doesn't take a lot of time. Once you get things set, you just kind of let them go through the process, and then it's pretty easy to put it into an airtight container after it's finished processing. The only downside to dehydrated food is that you do have to consider whether or not you got it fully dehydrated. If there is any extra moisture content left in some of the product and you leave it on the shelf for an extended period of time, you could run into molding issues. So you do want to just be careful about that if you choose to do some dehydration. The other thing that you might want to keep in mind is, depending on what you're dehydrating, it does take a little bit more to try to rehydrate it or to reconstitute it, and so that might be an issue for you as well, depending on what it is that you're doing. But if you wanted to dehydrate berries, for example, that would be a great thing to throw into some trail mix with some nuts, take it out, and you've got a great snack for later. You could also put dehydrated berries on cereal or in yogurt, and the flavor would be there. You would get that nutritional value. It would still be a great way to use up your food. There are a lot of different things that you can dehydrate. If that's something that you're interested in, by all means, give it a try. And I will link some of the items that I've used or some similar items to what I've been using in the description bar down below in case you're interested in trying out one of these methods of food preserving. The fifth food preservation method would be to do freeze-dried food. Now, if you have looked at all into long-term storage options or looked at maybe some of the preparedness websites or videos on preparedness, or maybe you are a backpacker, hiker, and you've used some of those MRE type of meals, the meal replacement meals, you might be familiar with freeze-dried food. It's very popular for those types of items. One, because all of the weight has really been taken out of the food, so it's very lightweight, which makes it ideal for backpackers and hikers. The other thing is that it will last for a really long extended period of time. So depending on what it is or the process that it's gone through, you're looking at extending possibly to many, many years, 10 to 25 years. I think I've seen some things that were freeze-dried where they said it had an estimated shelf life of 30 years. So you're looking at a much longer period of time. And all of those things can be benefits. With freeze drying, it does preserve the nutritional value of the food. However, it is drying it a little bit more so than the dehydrator because the process and the action is a little bit different, and that will cause it to be able to reconstitute or rehydrate a little bit better with the freeze-dried food than it would if you took your dehydrated food and tried to reconstitute it. So two similar yet very different kinds of methods and styles and ways of reconstituting that. One of the biggest drawbacks to freeze-dried food is that in order to do that process, you do need to have some special equipment, and that can be very expensive and also kind of bulky from what I've seen. A lot of the freeze dryers look like they're pretty large, so I don't know that they would be something you would have stored in your house, which could be problematic if you're short on space. But it is a very valid and valuable way of preserving food. So you might check into it. I've never done freeze drying myself, and I do not have a freeze dryer, but it does look like a very interesting method of preservation and one that could be worth checking into. I've watched some videos on people who have done freeze drying, and they absolutely love it. They love how it preserves their food, and they love that it's really going to have that longevity and be able to last a long time. So it just depends on what is right for you. So today we talked about 5 methods of food preservation: canning, freezing, fermenting, dehydrating, and freeze drying. And I hope that that has inspired you today to think about food preservation in a different way. And I hope today that you will take a look at what might work best for your situation and give it a try. And if you have not tried one of these before, maybe try something new. So if you've never done any fermenting, maybe give it a try. It's been new for me this year, and it's been great. Maybe if you haven't done any dehydrating before, that might be something that you want to try out. Whatever you can do to preserve your harvest, to preserve food from your garden, that's going to help you to make it through to the next season, and will cut down on some of your grocery costs as we get ready to go into our fall and winter season. All right, if you got value from today's video, don't forget to click like down below, and of course subscribe if you would like to continue to get videos from me. And I can't wait to see you back here next time. Bye everyone.